When we look beyond the white column mansion and the magnolias, we discover the world of slaves. They were a part of the day-to-day life at Melrose. These men, women, and children performed every task needed to serve the McMurrin family. The house slaves lived upstairs, while the bottom was reserved for dairy, laundry, and kitchen. Here was the yard and carriage drivers' slave quarters. 5 to 6 persons lived in a 400 square foot room, somewhat larger living space than found on many plantations. Homemade pieces and store-bought items that might include bedstands, several chairs, tables, trunks, all depended on what their masters would allow. In the slave quarters, away from white masters, the burdens of daily work, existed a black community that helped slaves make sense out of their lives. Family life, religion, song, dance, playing the musical instruments, and telling the stories that the slaves both described their experience and sought relief from hardship. Here, the Melrose slaves could enjoy a meal together, sit back, puff on a pipe, watch children play with marbles, or just sit with their children and tell tales, perhaps the best known today being the Briar Rabbit animal story. No matter what kind of terrible fix the rabbit found himself in, he got out by using his own resourcefulness and survival instinct. John McMurrin was a man on the rise when he moved from Pennsylvania to Natchez, Mississippi in the mid-1820s, where he established a profitable law office. The Melrose was considered by many to be the finest home in all of Natchez region. The Greek-style main house with immaculate brickwork featured a full-height front entry porch with 4 massive columns. The McMurrin family furnished all their home that a full purse could provide. Ornate Rococo-styled chairs, marble-top tables, wall-to-wall carpets, painted oilcloths, trim wooden Venetian blinds, and fine silk drapes filled the main house. In John's library, he acquired a lot of books with the sign of stature that you could read and write, so his law office and his home both had quite a library. In 1849, John and his wife, Mary Louise, and their 2 children moved into their magnificent new home. Here you see the finest of china. She had 4 sets of fine china. These came from Scotland, where John originated from. Here is the master bedroom. Past the bed was an indoor bath area. Here is the nursery, and the McMurrin's grandchildren slept. Most of these furnishings are the original furnishings in this home. Then next door is their son's bedroom. And this picture came from Scotland on one of their trips. Next, you'll see the bridal suite, where McMurrin's daughter, once married, her and her husband shared this room for several years and used the nursery. Following the death of their daughter and 2 grandchildren from disease during the Civil War, the McMurrins decided to sell Melrose and move in with Mrs. McMurrin's widowed mother. Here you'll see the children's playroom and bedroom. These are some of the little miniatures, and that is real cast iron. In most rooms, you'll notice this little bell. Each room had a different ring, and a slave knew by the tone of the ring where he needed to be. A hidden hallway in the rear of the first floor provided for discreet movement of house slaves. The Melrose landscape evolved as a mixture of ornamental grounds, natural setting, Work areas defined by fences and native cherry laurel hedges. A long winding drive lined with trees stretched from the cypress pond to the main gate up to the stately mansion. The grounds behind the main house presented quite a different picture. Here the McMurrins constructed the brick or wooden buildings which housed kitchen, livestock, carriage, tools, estate slaves. The Melrose slaves tended vegetable gardens and an orchard of fruit trees behind each of the large brick dependency buildings. They were planted near the rear slave quarters to shade them. Backyards were little more than open spaces, broken only by fences, dog, poultry pens, dirt roads, or paths. Later, in the years following the Civil War, white owners of Melrose leased the fields to newly freed African American families to plant cotton. The families of Reuben and Ella Sims and Jane Johnson were among former slaves who took on new roles as sharecroppers, returning some of the land to Melrose in a commercial agricultural use. Beyond this beautiful tree, beyond the orchard, was found a slave cemetery. The Kellys, the second owner, decided to remove the brick wall and the headstones. Several years ago, they brought in cadaver dogs and discovered there were, they do not know how many, slaves were buried there, with the headstones no longer there with them, identifying them. The paper did acknowledge Laura, a 16-year-old slave, died of a disease. Her funeral was attended by several prominent family slaves. That is all the information. This was somebody's daughter, somebody's friend. She now has no grave, no headstone. Certain, not all their days were filled with music and laughter. There were human trials, aggravations. We can only speculate on what life was like for a slave. Our modern scholarship cannot possibly reveal the reality of slavery. We cannot imagine what it is like to be bought, sold, or owned. We can, however, acknowledge the contribution of these enslaved people who lived and labored here. Approximately 80,000 people are buried here. The cemetery goes back to the early 1800s to present day.